Reinis, it's great to have you on the show. And, I wasn't thinking about this, but I feel like we're blood brothers or somehow related. It looks like we have a common ancestor somewhere if you're seeing the video. But we also had I almost lost my right ring finger, and then you had lost yours earlier in life. But it was an interesting conversation about that cross-body education that came out of that with you had to throw the shot put with the other hand, but then set a personal best. Can you recap that story a little bit? I just thought that was really interesting.
Yes. So, Joel, you're referring to the story that I put out in my book in 2019. I've shared it in different places and at different times, and I actually heard from others my story being told different ways, and actually a lot of times untrue ways. I lost my finger in a freak accident when I was trying to jump, grab the edge of the roof, and see what's going on my roof. I was studying at K-State. And yes, and basically, long story short, it ripped off to the first knuckle. They had to shave it off until the last knuckle. And basically, I'm 23 years old with 4 fingers and big dreams for the Olympic Games in the decathlon. It was a year before the Rio Olympics, and my coach is already setting up some goals, and I'm believing him. Cliff Ravelto at Kansas State. And suddenly I find myself training only with the left hand, and I was like, if I ever want to make it at all, I gotta do something. So it wasn't something like, oh, you need to do. Nobody told me that I need to be training with the left hand. I just couldn't imagine not doing anything, and that's it. So basically, Friday was the surgery. I think for 10 days I had to have a cast on, so I can't run, I can't sweat, blah, blah, blah. And a week later, or I guess 10 days, I was back doing snatches with one arm, with the left arm, and my right hand is my dominant hand. So shot put, discus, jab, of course, the grip for the pole vault, all of that. And yeah, I didn't think twice. I was like, I just need to continue training. I already set competition aims, season goals. And suddenly, 2.5 months later, when it's showtime, I got to go test it because I was out for 2 months. I think it was completely out. I couldn't really compete, couldn't grab anything. I wasn't allowed to. I was given green light. The same day I went down to Texas to compete in long jump. The following week, it was Texas it was KU relays. And I signed up exactly for that, for shot put and the discus. And the first was disc. Everything went out the sector. But in the shot put, I actually PR'd. I had an outdoor personal best after a month. No, I would have been 6 or 7 weeks straight, just trained with the left hand. So it was an interesting lesson, unexpected one. And then I started digging into that, why, like trying to find reasons why that was. And there was this concept of cross education.
Yeah.
So now when I coach, I coach that. I always say, hey, go do it with the other hand if it hurts, or with the other leg. Yeah, it's been an important theme since my accident within my coaching arsenal. Go do the other thing, the other side.
Yeah. I think about how or why that works, in the sense that I think it is like, okay, there's cross-body education, but I wonder what that means sometimes exactly. Like what, like it's like, is the one side, like I have a daughter who's 19 months old, and she watches the big kids. And sometimes I almost have this analogy in my mind, like my 19-month-old wants to do everything the big kids can, and she mirrors them. So she wants to, if she wants to jump, if they climb up the slide and jump off it, she wants to climb up the slide and try to jump off it. And I have to catch her before she hurts herself there. But like, I find myself thinking about exactly why that happens. But I have a similar story as well. With my finger, I couldn't dunk or shoot with my right hand for months, like probably 2 months at least. And so I found myself jumping off my right leg and trying to dunk with my left. And what's interesting is I don't have, I don't have a track event at the time because it was basketball season, or it was before basketball season to pair it to. But I I definitely think that helped me to spend just a lot of time jumping off my right, because I went from, off my left leg and dunking with my right arm, I could get my elbow up to the rim, but my left arm, maybe just my wrist a couple inches over. Like, it was a pretty
Mhm.
substantial difference. If even that, maybe just wrist to the rim. But after a few months of only being able to do the right side, I was able to dunk with two hands off my right, just barely. Like, there was this rim that was like maybe a half inch low. It was always like that rim kind of thing. And I was able to, I got a couple two handers on that one. And I can't help but think, looking back, I think sometimes of all those things in my own training history that were not things you would normally do, air quotes, that added to
Mm.
that equation. And so,
Yeah, you talk about novelty a lot. I
yeah,
listen to your podcast sometimes, and I think there's that all of a sudden is different. Um, I even talk to kids when I speak in some conferences or just go to kids club team sport meetings. Recently, I was at the floorball camp, and I challenged them to try to brush their teeth with the left hand and maybe stand on the one leg doing it. Doing something different, and um, and I think it's something new, and suddenly the brain but it is interesting what you said. What is it exactly that happens there? So we can put our finger on and replicate perfectly. We know it that it happens, and even when I was a kid, I started track and field when I was 12 in sixth grade in Latvia, and like even PE teachers would tell us, oh, if your one hand is tired, go with the other one. It helps speed recovery. And there is such concept in sports psychology. I can't remember what it's called, but there is such concept that yeah, you'll basically increase the recovery, the nervous system recovery with if you do the opposite hand or leg or. But yeah, what exactly? Like we probably don't know yet.
yeah, yeah. I think just from that, just pure, I guess you call it structuralism or materialism only. It's like, oh, it's like the crossover in the corpus callosum in
Yeah.
the brain. Like this cross, it's only neurological from that physical perspective. And of
Hmm.
course, there is a strong portion of that. But I think about what you said with like just novelty in the brain paying attention. Like just
Hmm.
you're doing the same thing, but on the other side, and you're probably not as good as it at it. The brain has to pay a lot more attention than a lot of times a lot of processes would go on autopilot, and it's a guaranteed way to make sure the brain is fully paying attention. And I think about the same feeling of that. Okay, if I'm trying something with another limb, how can I get a lot of that feeling when I'm doing my normal activity, to treat it as if it's, it is the same thing, but it's almost like you're learning pieces of it all over again for a moment,
Yeah.
experiencing it in a way, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, perfect. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but the exact answer to that, I don't think there's an exact answer to that one. I have different methods I try and like to try. Even little things like exogen, like microweights or different loading strategies and things oh, this feels different. Oh, how does it feel to sprint with this type of loading or this type of activity?
I like one sentence that I got from my teammate when I was training under Roman Chevrolet the last 2 years in Prague, which we'll get into hopefully. He said, "Never change the winning team." An old coach once told him that, and basically he was referring to the idea: don't analyze what works, and it's ridiculous. You want to analyze because you want to replicate within our Western minds, yeah.
Yeah.
Still, like it takes out the mystery, and
Yeah.
in art of coaching there has to be that mystery a little bit in some ways. I think because we're not robots, it's more fun that way too, for the coach and for the athlete. I like that.
Yeah, that's really, I love how you said that with just that way of thinking, because procedural learning, like give me the protocol, is a very Western optimization way of doing it. If you do A, B, C, D, the protocol,
Yeah.
you will get the thing. And I think in a lot of cases that is true. And even in athletics, you need at least a decent protocol. You can't have a terrible one
No,
for
100%, of
sure.
course.
Or even a mediocre one. You want a good one. But
Yeah.
there's also that the way I look at almost the way a child experiences something for the first time. I think there's something about that that also lives and maybe when I mention awareness as well, like the
Mhm.
awareness you have when you do a skill with a different arm and how you're paying attention to that. Um,
Yeah, I remember writing even in this book, and now observing my 3-year-old daughter. Uh, I don't know how you guys in America eat ice cream. We bite it here. I think adults
oh,
bite. We don't just lick it. We have
oh,
bite it.
that
And
I get like pins
kids,
and needles
look
thinking
at
about
how kids do it.
it.
And my daughters, they enjoying it, the
Yeah,
process
yeah,
of it.
yeah,
It's like it takes them sometimes 20 minutes, 25 minutes to eat that ice cream. It's ridiculous, but in that process, they're embracing it, and I love it. I think coaching is good coaching is something like that. I think
yeah,
sometimes there's mystery involved. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's where that play is definitely the link there, and I know we'll get to that. Love the work you're doing there. For a more, I guess you could say, formal biography, Reinis, tell me a little bit about your history in the decathlon, and then what you did as an athlete before the decathlon.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That
Awesome.
whole pyramid. Tell me about the pyramid of your athlete development.
Yes. Great. Um, so my dad was a decathlete up until I think early high school age. We had and still have one sport boarding school where from the age of 13, 14 or so, you go to a sport boarding school. You're not with your parents anymore. You have two training sessions a day and you go to school in between, kind of like college in the US. So we have such a post-Soviet leftover system here, and my dad used to go to such a school. My wife as well later on, uh, and he was a decathlete. He had the same coach I ended up having my last year high school as well, uh, and it was well, it was an inspiration. You as a as a son to an athlete, former athlete dad. Watching his medals to me it was interesting. It's like, yes, I want to do what my dad did. And we were watching the Sydney Olympics in 2000. I think we even had still um, gray color TV back then, and he was like, "Yeah, you need to watch this guy." He pointed to Roman Chevrolet, the Czech. At that time, he was
Mm,
fighting for the gold, but lost and got silver. Lost to the Estonian guy Erkin, and he's like, this guy is gonna be the one. He was still young back then, and he's like, you need to watch the decathlete is the greatest athlete in the world. So he planted that seed in my head. My dad was a decathlete, and the greatest athlete in the world is Roman Chevrolet from 8 years old. I'm 8 back then. And in 2001, my cousins and I, we organized, with the help of parents, we organized the Little Olympics. So a year after the Sydney Olympics, I grew up in really countryside, like half a mile away, the closest neighbors, through the forest kind of thing. Not much to do apart from work. Really deep countryside of Latvia, and you needed some fun during the summers. And yeah, I had 4 other cousins, and we all did something like a multi-event, maybe in 2-day competition or something. There's pole vault involved, I know. We got small pine trees, shaved off, and so they're not hurting the grip. And my dad tried to teach all of those things to me. He was very playful with me, and all summer we were vaulting in our backyard. Basically, started over blackcurrant bushes, grandfather's blackcurrant bushes, and ended up on old bed frames and mattresses, whatever we could set up, and yeah, so my track and field journey started in sixth grade, so from 12 years old, and all the way to up until high school, I had the same coach. He was a coach of several Olympic medalists, like the first coach. One was won Calgary Olympics in bobsled, and we had Einar Skovals, silver medalist from the Beijing Olympics in the javelin. So we had a tradition. He was a master at creating the environment, especially for boys. Several Olympians came from my hometown, small village. Um, so and being in that environment, it's just you get lost in it. That's it. Easily spring break could be 5 hours in the gym doing everything,
mhm.
and we loved it. And there's not much else to do in the small town.
Sure.
And whenever I speak to kids, I say that it's like get lost in your sport, fall in love with it, and go to a coach who helps with that. Uh, I chose not to. Well, I guess my dad chose not to send me to the boarding school because he said I mostly learned there how to smoke well and drink well.
Yeah.
So I didn't go down that route. I stayed and finished my high school and actually got pretty decent, pretty good. That year, I started going to training camps once in a while, joining the other decathletes groups in Latvia. There's one ultimately group that had produced international decathletes before. So I joined that for 2 training camps, and all of a sudden, out of this village guy, something started coming out. And I, so would have been my last year of high school. Under 20 European Championships, I placed fifth, and that earned me a scholarship to the U.S. And Kansas State was the only university from the few I had offers from that took me, and then they taught me, and not just the English, all of it. I was hurt when they took me, but they took me under their wing, and yeah, I think I started learning. Up until then, more or less, it was a lot of playing. At least
Mhm.
the junior year of high school, there was a lot of playing track and field. I was spending a lot of time doing it, but it wasn't so much like very professional level track and field. 5 years in the U.S., a lot of injuries, one freak accident, and then followed the U.S. journey was Prague. Uh, had an opportunity to, well, US visa doors were closing and I wanted to continue. There's some major injuries involved, including Achilles double rupture in the US in 2015. So I had to either call it quits by the age of 23, close to qualifying for the Olympic Games in Rio, or being on the track for that. I was actually, looking back, I was actually placed third in NCAA indoor rankings, Division One rankings in 2015, uh, the early season, and yes, and suddenly I'm hurt twice, rupturing Achilles, losing a finger, and what now? And it was tough year, couple of months. I was like, I guess it's time to quit, and nobody will blame me for it, you know. And when I dwelled on it for a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, I mean, it took me a year and a half until I could compete again after the second rupture. Basically, everyone told me, Reinis, you fine. Like, you don't need to do it. You're good. And I realized it's much worse when I live with that thought that I will never try. Um, so I stuck with it. I set some goals and I went to Taiwan. Set the goal to compete in Taiwan, the World University Games in 2017. I came back, didn't have a great result, but finished ninth, and decided that I want to continue and give it a shot for the Tokyo Olympics. So the journey continued in Prague, where that's I think a whole new chapter that I think we should touch, but maybe later on, because that would be my semi-professional career in the decathlon that I tried, uh, succeeded in some ways and didn't succeed in others. But in a nutshell, I improved my personal best in the decathlon and some of the key events like the discus. So I'm officially probably uh, the best four-finger decathlete in the world
Yeah.
throwing
At
discus.
World Olympics.
You know?
Yeah. Athletic performance is built on a spectrum of training methods, from high velocity skills to power training to strength work. And on one end of that spectrum, on that strength end, you have the most targeted work in the form of machines. And this is part of the reason that so many top speed and strength coaches have their favorite machines to deliver that targeted stimulus. For decades, Hammer Strength has been a top provider of reliable, effective machines that are trusted by coaches and athletes worldwide. They fit seamlessly into that total performance program, delivering that targeted strength stimulus. When it comes to your machine-based strength training needs, think Hammer Strength. Weighted vests have been a staple in athletic performance for decades, but the next generation in wearable resistance is found in light micro loads placed on the limbs of the body. The leader in micro loading and wearable resistance is Exogen gear by Lila. Exogen is used by the top track and field and sports performance coaches in the world, and it provides a level of angular velocity training and potentiation that is second to none. If you want 20% off of Exogen gear by Lila, then head to lilateam.com. That's lilateam.com and use the code JustFly20. That's JustFly20 for 20% off your order. Grab your Exogen gear today and see the difference in your training. Through all that, I was going to say, I mean, with the double Achilles rupture as well, I'll certainly have to ask you your preferred methods there, because I know, Achilles and tendons are always a big thing. Maybe that's a question I can circle back to. But so one of the things that I was just going to say in regards to a decathlon, and when I think about, there's a lot of routes into that. But one of the things I think of with what does a decathlon mean for anybody training? That's one of those things I look at it now. And one of the things I think about was, you mentioned pole vault early.
Mhm.
And I think about all the track events that you could do or that are there. I feel like pole vault is the one that you talked about being like childlike. Like a lot of pole vaulters have that, retain a lot of that quality. There's something about the event that there's like the thrill of it, the joy of shooting yourself up far into the air and falling. There's something about that event. And then I think about even child games, just giving them sticks, like long sticks, like 6 feet dowel rods or whatever, and having them vault over like from mat to mat, like Michael Zweifel back when he was working in his gym. That was a game he had, was grab a stick and
Yep.
vault across the river. And I remember one time my son, who was 6 at the time, we were waiting for my daughter's soccer practice to get done, and we were just sitting around on the grass. And my wife was the assistant coach there. So I'm just like kind of watching the baby and watching my son. And I see this big, long, like, it was like a PVC pipe. It was rubber, but it wasn't that stale. But I was like, hey, and you think you can vault over, you think you could take this pipe and launch yourself from here and vault to that spot? And he was like, oh, yeah. And he was like having a lot of fun. More fun than if I said, hey, you think you can long jump this? Which he would have tried that too, for sure. But
Mhm.
there's just something about having that tool and going higher and further than you normally would, that, I mean, it's very joyful, but it's also extremely athletic. There's gymnastic qualities. And I think there's just a lot of really playful pieces in there that can go a long way regardless of the exact avenue.
Yeah, pole vault is interesting, and it's very unique for track and field. And actually, I got into an argument, a private argument with basically the best pole vault coach in Latvia now. He was the announced as the best coach. Last year he had 582 jumper. Still was in under 23 age group, and he basically, I pushed this on long-term athlete development, and you need to delay this early specialization. And he argued that in pole vault you kind of need to start a little bit earlier, and I can see that in some ways, but while not neglecting the play. And I think pole vault groups are unique and they kind of stick together, but it's not bad because the sport itself requires play. So they don't get at least the psychological burnout, because it's all about ropes and climbing and blah, blah, core
Yep.
strength, but through fun, in a fun manner.
Yes.
So it's not this kind of typical early specialization. You do skills only. No, it's all integrating in the sport. So pole vault is awesome. I want to say hurdles too. I wasn't good at hurdles, but hurdles too. And sometimes if I go to conferences, I say hurdles is a tool out of a different planet, basically out
Mm.
of a different universe, because it's such a good tool for athletic development. But yeah, like expressions of pole vault as well, some drills of pole vault as well. And yeah, you're spot on. I think uh, pole vault is harder to implement in youth training often, just because of the environment and blah blah, blah setup. But it still can be done, especially in a sand pit. A lot of drills can be done in the sand. Hold two hurdles, each side, and put some rubber band across, and they vault. They have a pole vault training. It's great, awesome, and call it whatever you want. Especially with younger kids, they want to have that's there's a lava between blah
Yep.
blah blah. You need to name it in a special way, and
There's a
it's
monster that lives in there, and you,
a
you gotta
blast.
get,
It's
you gotta get
definitely a
over it.
blast for them. So yeah, pole somehow was scary at the beginning ish. Although my dad did teach me that, I think it was 6 years old the first time he taught me. He actually broke his collarbone when he was showing it to my cousin and me. When I was really young, I have that memory. The pole broke and he fell and he broke his shoulder. But it's a great tool. It is a great tool.
Yeah. Even for things like, I think a lot of times people look at, maybe this is that Eastern Western, it's kind of like a split. It's either you're either A, training pure outputs, or you're B, just messing around and playing and having fun. And I think there's just such a complex weave between those two. It's not one or the other. And
Yeah.
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 And I was just going to say, like, pole vault, especially, I mean, you look at how fast, like, Mondo is, the world record holder. He's really fast. And sometimes I wonder, I just had this conversation recently with Tim Sheaf, Way of the Rope, of like, would he be that fast if he specialized in the 100? I wonder if he's actually faster, because you get that joy of like, and rhythm. You have the task of, you have this massive, like, however big the pole he's vaulting off of, because he has to have, whatever size to get over the bar,
Yeah.
20 plus feet.
That's a great question. I didn't think about it that way, but that is true. I give a lot of constraints to kids for sprinting purposes, for actually developing their form and awareness in space. I give them a stick run, or sometimes they run together. They hold the stick together, and there's one free hand. Let's say the inside hand is holding a stick, and they're in a pair. And such tools, sometimes I give them a ball that they have to roll together, or by themselves, but constraints, and I try to explain them the constraint that you're developing the brain, and I think pole vault in that way could be that too. And maybe, yeah, it would be an interesting question to ask to Mondo's dad.
Yeah.
Whether he thinks that. I mean, he's fast. He is naturally fast, and if you saw the interview he had with I believe his maybe parents or himself, he basically now trains like a sprinter. But to get there, that's a different question. How did he get here that fast? Because he's really fast. I mean, insanely fast for a pole vaulter. And yeah, I mean, you got to do something different if you want to be that good. And yeah, so
Yeah. I think about constraints of sprinting too, just because it's inherent and obvious that your foot will contact the ground in sprinting, but it may be a little more variable what your upper body actually does with connection into the legs and connecting across the trunk. And when you have a stick, if you're just holding a tool in one hand, you get it more of a connection because you get a tactile, you feel it and you feel how it feeds in the system.
Right.
But then if you have a stick or something, and maybe this is something that, I could ask people who work with lacrosse athletes who they run with a stick. There's always that cross body connection. But I think that the interesting thing with holding a pole, like a very long, big, heavier pole versus the lacrosse stick, is it strikes me that lacrosse stick would favor more of a high frequency running, like a real quick, where that pole, you have to have rhythm, you have to have some power to push it. And as it's slowly falling, like your frequency of running has to engage with that. So I think there's just good general, I think there's a lot of good general tools. But then, like you said, too, kids, like just a vault in the sand competition, just like a smaller pole, and how far can you go across the sand? And I think the thrill of that too, like Flynn Disney talks about risk, and Stephen Kotler as well with flow state, like a little risk, just a little that you're not going to hurt yourself too badly. I think can be a big performance enhancer, and probably for some more than others. For some, it's probably a performance decreaser. I think for people who are true pole vaulters, maybe it's a performance enhancer where they actually couldn't get the thing unless they had that level.
I really wonder what professional pole vaulters, how much time do they spend in the sand pit? Because a lot of groups do drills, professional groups do the drills in the sand. And I was still already 31, I think, 30 years old. We were always in the off season, in September, October, we were playing in the sand with pole vaults. I'm 30. Roman Chevrolet, when he trained, he was doing that when he was 36. It's ridiculous. And that's great something, and it's fun, and you create a challenge out of it. You're like, who gets further? You're working on the distance, for example, rather than the height. And things like that. You can do a lot of play with that. But constraints is key word in my training method and philosophy, especially for youth athletes, and adults need it too. Like even professionals need it too. a large theme that I will try to push. We will have a coaching summit series here in Valmiera, Latvia in November. So European Athletics organizing this summit series across Europe. And we got one conference here in Valmiera, which is awesome. And the theme is next gen athletics. And the underlying theme I helped develop is basically getting these under 18 to under 23 kids also play more. Because
Yeah.
if one of them, or say, okay, 2% of them will have a chance at a professional career eventually, they want to love it. You want them to love it. You want them to be engaged with it fully, So even if it's a micro dose, because athletics is uh, it's so linear, and it's run straight and turn left. I coached basketball players in Prague in 2022, I guess. The last year I was there in Prague. I prepared them for Eurobasket. Three Czech national team players, strength and conditioning, and they come to the stadium to Prague, and they suddenly see all these runners, sprinters, and one of them is like, "I can't imagine my life like that. Like, it's just boring. You just run." And it depends on the psychology of the person, etc. But still, track and field is very dry and linear without the play. So when I hear the track, like a lot of old school coaches here, and at least in Eastern Europe, basically simultaneously use long-term athletic development with track and field, but
Yes.
the
Yeah.
definition is incomplete. I think that without the play
Yeah.
is a dry and bad solution for long-term success. So I really think that, and I try to leave it out, let's say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is, as soon as you go to just running, I think those team sport athletes are right, because yeah, like you said, I believe you had said something about like when you're a track athlete, either during the podcast or before, like if you're a track athlete and you go to do a different sport, you're a attrition, you went to you just went to go play around or something like that. Like but those team sport athletes are right. Like they're not wrong. And I think that when we can take some of those pieces and put that into track, it's always really good. And yeah, you got to have the times where you buckle down, but that, I think if you're in a stimulating training environment, like a good training group, that takes care of itself. Like just doing the thing takes care of itself. You mentioned with the older athletes. I want to get back to hurdles too, because I love that you mentioned that. And again, things that go beyond track and field, just to be for all athletes. And you mentioned even older athletes of pole vault. Aaron Cantor is one of the Evolve Move Play coaches. Well, Rafe Kelly's Evolve Move Play organization, and I went to one of the seminars that he put on, or Aaron led in Asheville. And it's funny because one of the things I saw Aaron just doing recently, this was just on his social media, is just taking a stick, like he just found it out in the woods. Maybe it's like 6 or 7 feet long. And he's just vaulting around randomly, just going in the forest, just vaulting around, trying different turns. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, I want to go next time I'm on a hike. I'm going to try to find something that I can do that with,
Perfect.
because it's
I
kind of,
love it.
yeah. And that's like more of a lifetime activity. But how much, I just think it is interesting to, maybe even mechanically speaking, on one end, you could say, okay, you got to do your zone 2 cardio and get this time in, or you could go for a walk in the woods and find a stick and vault
Yes.
around with it for
Yes.
that time. And who cares what your heart rate is? Probably good. It's just, how much better for you would that be, I think, on so
No,
many.
we have, obviously Latvia we have winters, but although these years not great, not consistent winters, but when we do, then with the youngest group, I have 7 to 10 year olds in my youngest group, about 20 of them, and we do these snow days. So they take their, what do you call it? Luge,
Yeah, sled, like a
sled, yeah, sleds. Basically, yeah, they're personal sleds that they go down the hills, and we take those and we compete. We play all sorts of chase with that, and
Oh yeah,
and it's nearby in the next park. Everyone's wet and laughing, and we um, we play with snowballs. We do all sorts of competitions up the hill, down the hill, and it's a track and field practice, and in a centralized system where we're required to show something for it. And actually, that's a point I really wanted to leave you with here, and for everyone to hear. Maybe in other Eastern European countries, whoever is listening,
yeah,
will be useful. When I have a requirement for kids to compete and get certain results throughout the years, with the youngest group, say if there's a competition coming next month, more or less all month until that week of comp, I'll be doing long-term athletic development through all of the possible constraints. We'll never do long jump from a full approach, even though it's kind of required. We need to teach them that from the rules. I'll give them hurdles in between, hops and whatever, maybe a roll in between, and then they have to restart the run. They're always annoyed, they're irritated that I do that because they do want to measure it, and 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 I'm the kind of coach who always irritate, and then they're hungry for that far jump
Yep. Yep.
and they're really hungry for it because coach didn't let us, and I want not to let them as long as I can, as far
Same.
as possible. I
Same.
can do that, and it is one thing that I have observed with. I also don't want to say generalize this generation, but at least in Latvia, we have a situation where a lot of kids don't know how to play anymore. They somehow, whether it's the parenting or the busy lifestyles, it's the screens, or I don't know, but there's always, say, from 20 around 4 to 5 will be like, no, I don't. I want to have a routine. I want to just run. I want to do boring stuff.
Mhm.
Too much. 5 out of 20 doing boring stuff. Why would you want to do that? If you and I believe in that Jordan Peterson's idea. He always mentioned it in his Chaos and Order, uh, you know, what podcasts and books about the mice research that mice live longer and they're healthier if they play. It develops certain part of their brain rather than a routine, and I think it's something to do with the modern parenting in the West. We really steal that from kids, and it's something that needs to be regained. I really think that.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love as you're talking about holding back the outputs. I'm just like, yes, that's exactly how I run a high jump practice. Typically, the high school I'm coaching at now is we do a lot of different constraints of the jump, a lot of different constraints of the approach. Like I'll put hurdles out, they either bound over them, or there's different stride patterns, or you're running wider or narrower, and just different ways to jump the bar. And we'll always challenge at the end, but I try to hold off on that because if the whole practice is just did I make it, did I miss it, it's as high, the bar is as high as it goes. I believe you could practice like that for a few weeks or months and probably see a similar rate of climb of progress as if you played more. But I believe if you have that foundation of play and all the movement options, your peak at the end of the year or your career is going to be a lot higher. Just because you have more movement variability and you have more of that technical, just you're in it. You feel the different technique your body's capable of. But then you also have the love of hopefully I'm cultivating that just love of learning, love of figuring it out. Like, you mentioned like there's the mystery. Like the mystery is what's my best technique? How does this feel? How did that feel? And to find the joy in that journey and then noticing what helped the jump ultimately. So yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of people are really wired. They just want the output. Just give me the time. I just want to go do this thing. Give me the time. And yeah, like we want to do that, but if it can't be balanced with a patience to learn, like a patience to be in the moment and feel how your body works, at least for a long term. Like I get it if it's like a baseball player and they want to improve their 60-yard and it's like, look, I don't have that much time to mess around. Okay, let's get the timing out. Let's do the basic, most transferable constraints. But I feel like track and field, especially, it is by far to your benefit to be a lover of the movement acquisition. How am I actually moving in the process of getting to those outputs to be as powerful as possible?
Yes, I think a lot of it I have heard through your podcasts, but to be honest, like this lesson didn't come to me completely naturally. Uh, when you are an elite or competing and training with elite athletes, in my case, an individual sport, you become a routine. Your life is a routine. Track and field, it really is a routine. And coming from the approaches I have come through, and I was very much Mr. Routine. So and I made a lot of mistakes with kids. I'm coaching regularly on a daily basis kids only for the second year. Before that, it was sporadic in Manhattan, Kansas. The two track clubs that I coach, and all of the mistakes I made with them, even though they loved me, I was approachable and I was a nice coach, etc. I think they take it as a net positive. But looking back, like my mentality was for the kid, 7, 8 year old kid, my mentality was if you don't want it, the kid is just coming to play. If you don't want it enough, leave. You don't have to be here. That was my mentality. I never always said that, never necessarily said that, but that was how I thought. And with kids, it's not that. Like today, I had two kids from two girls from some mixture of German Russian descent, and they're 6 and 8 years old, and they create the environment. I had trained them twice before for 2 sessions, and basically they're like, "Yeah, put this rope down here. That's gonna be lava, and you need to hold this stick here. We'll crawl through. If we touch, we get a minus point." They tell me how it should be,
Yep, yep. They're
and
great
I have to jump
teachers.
from this box to the next. We have to do it 6 times, and I entered youth coaching when I started and made all of the mistakes. I entered with the mentality, I have the right tools for you. You listen because you don't know, I know, and we'll figure it out. Hopefully, it will work. Yeah. But with kids, you need to come with a very much long-term understanding what they need. Yes, true. You cannot be without any direction. Uh, but but you need to be completely free. And because to them, if you come stuck with your structure, with your plan, perfect plan, most likely they're not going to enjoy it as much. And I noticed it probably a year ago when I was just getting angry that it's not going by the plan whatsoever. And I think the kids started really, and I lost a few kids because of that, because I was so structured. So it's relatively, I want to say, a recent lesson for me that I just picked out by being here hours. Really putting in a lot of hours with kids. They'll teach you a lot. They'll really teach you a lot of lessons, good lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of Michael Zweifel and, the pole vault activities for kids, he has said that, any coach should work with a high level athlete or a group of high level athletes and then kids at some point along that spectrum. And I just think that's so important because I think about the things you learn from working with children. And there is that you have to put aside your ego and that desire to control on one end. Like it's like, and I think some of that's even like can be anxiety too. People have an anxiety when things are too chaotic. So
Mhm.
it could be like an ego or an anxiety. But then there's also curiosity because I really enjoy watching how children like solve movement problems or figure out
Mhm.
skills. Like we just had yesterday in my garage, I think I was talking to you about this before we pushed record. I had this little vertical trainer from the dunk camp that it's not like a vertex, it's a bell you ring. And for kids, that's amazing. For adults, it's cool too. It's like a bell is so much cooler than, little flaps. A flap vertex are great too, but like there's something about a bell and just watching all these kids go to try to touch the bell and they're loving it. Like they're getting back in line over and over again. And but I was watching how they would figure out a running approach jump because that's not natural like running is for like a 6 or 7 year old. There's a lot more steps along the way that tend to happen. But to watch that, they try to some of the times they try to run faster, then sometimes they try to slow down. And one kid who's I think he's like a very wide ISA type of very like he's going to be great at squatting someday. Like he figured out that he had to slow way down and almost do like a squat, like basically a standing vertical with a mini run in, and then he would get way up there. And obviously
Yeah.
that skill will build over time if he chooses to with more to handle more speed. But it's just I just enjoyed watching how the kids did it. And whereas maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would have found myself tempted to be like, oh, you should try to do this and that
Yeah.
and the other thing. And yeah, that time for more suggestion comes along. But to me, it's one of the best times because you get to be an observer in the purest form. And like you
Yeah.
said with those kids who said, hey, let's play the game this way. That's just such good input for a coach. Like as a coach, it's some of the best
Yes.
learning that you can do because
Yeah.
there's always the kid that's inside of us
Mhm.
too. And some athletes more than
Yeah.
others. but there's always that part of us, it never, and it always should be there, to some degree.
Something comes to mind. I had an investor. We were trying to create an app. We have an app, BSD Coach, and it's about libraries. It's about long-term athletic development libraries, and we're trying to gamify it through some grants here in Europe. And my investor said, Reinis, you need to just spend a day in a playground watching what the kids want. We're thinking of putting out screens in these kind of outdoor workout stations or playgrounds, and some programs or something. And he's like, you shouldn't start a thing before you spend a day watch what they do in these, because they'll create stuff.
Mhm.
My programmer used to say, he's like, Reinis, the app is not foolproof yet. You broke it. And I think kids break the intent, like the purpose of systems. They basically, they don't go by the rules. If you have a setup station for that, and you as the creator of this exercise station or kid playground meant it to have it used like that, they're gonna do it the exact opposite, the most unexpected way. They kind of broke the intent, and that's how kids work, and it really keeps you fresh. Kids really tire you in some ways because they're high energy, and adults, you run out of that energy pretty quickly when you spend with a lot of time with kids. But if you take it as they are, you take the lessons as they are, and you just observe and find enjoyment in it. It's no longer that energy sucking. It's much more, as you said, enjoyable for me as a coach.
Yeah, I think to try to like really control a group of kids, outside, and not dig into the inherent play and joy, I think that is emotionally exhausting. And I'm not in physical education, but and anybody in physical education, forgive me if I am trying to put things together in my head that aren't true, but I wonder, like, sometimes I ask my kids about their gym teacher, and they like some of them, but a lot of them they say are mean. But then there's also a lot of like circle time, meaning they don't just go play, they have to do like push-ups and sit-ups on their mat. And my kids are like 7, so I'm just like, but I think that's to control a really wily group. And I'll say it's not easy. Like, I've talked with friends who have actually gotten out of track and done physical education because it's just a better job security here. And also coaching track at a small college based on recruiting is exhausting a lot of times. So I get that. And but anyways, I wonder if it's too much control. It's almost like if you have a group, and some groups are challenging too. You get all sorts of different kids. Some kids don't want to do anything. Some kids are just crazy, ADD off the walls, and I get that. But it makes me wonder if you're just if too much control with a group that is meant to be wild and observe, could burn you out a little bit. And
Oh yeah, 100%. I tried to. Since I was a Mr. Routine, it was difficult for me to now deal with the mess, the equipment all over the place. Now, when I shifted my mindset towards these are kids, they should be like that. And actually, I think my 3-year-old daughter, really taught me that, because it's different. You see your kid through a different lens. And now I actually value the mess. And at the end, to collect the mess, I give them a task, collect the red cones, collect the blah blah blah, the red balls, and that's a drill. That's a competition. But in PE class, is different, of course, because you really have a set of completely disinterested individuals and their problems beyond belief at home, etc. But in a semi sport environment, still, like, it should be attempted in PE classes too. But the mess is good. Like, if the more mess, the better, really, and embrace it. And it's about changing the value system for a coach, I think, and an educator.
Yeah, we must be on the same brain wave in so many ways, because you mentioned the drill
Is
is
it the
cleaning
finger?
up.
I think, is it the finger?
Yeah, it's the finger. Yeah, and some common ancestor, however many generations back. But also, I at the end of soccer practice, I make it a race. Who could pick up the most cones? Go. And all the kids run like, da, 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 da.
Yeah,
They're trying to get the most cones. I'm like, oh, thanks. You saved me like 2 minutes. And you guys
exactly.
have fun. So it's like you always gamify everything at that age is the thing. And I was going to say, so back to, you mentioned hurdles as well. And this is a general thing, I think, is hurdling. I think it's in our nature as human beings, because like I have these little dog agility hurdles and I'll set them out. I mean, I just run over them on my sidewalk in my front yard pretty semi-regularly, we'll say. But when I set them out and I put them pretty low and I ask my kids if they want to run over them, they love it. Like if I said, hey kids, you guys want to just run as fast as you can down the sidewalk, they might be like, why? But if there's hurdles, or if I race them, they'll do it. I mean, I was actually just racing my son and then the neighborhood boys yesterday. I was running like 100 meters uphill, up a little hill, and then I gave them like a 40-meter head start, and they had to beat me to the thing. And of course, they're going to beat me, so they're all like, yeah, and it was great. But the hurdles, I find the engagement, the natural engagement in a barrier is just it's very high, and it's also, you mentioned all these drills, it's differential learning. Like if you're gonna, even if you never do track or you don't hurdle, just the fact that you at least had some exposure to hurdling,
Yes.
you're going to be better in sport. You're going to be a better runner on many levels, especially if you got to the point where there was some level of rhythm involved. And then it's also, there's just something too that's, I think, cool about the rhythm and clearing a barrier and the body timing. It's almost like running 2.0. And it's just, I think that.
Yes, 2.0. I love it. I love it. Actually, when I think about it, probably you mentioned you try not to give regular just jog. Sometimes there is value in that too, but jogging through the forest, beautiful, awesome.
Yeah.
But like I remember last year, I was putting out maybe 4 or 5 hurdles around the track, and they had to go. They had to run for a warm up. These hurdles and like in between was a side shuffle sometimes it was a backward run. They had to turn around for the hurdle, and I think it all comes to some degree from my decathlon background, because people don't realize it's 2-day comp, but it's 9.5 minutes of work, and I'm just bored from like we have one event and I hate it already. 1,500 meters, the last event, we're bored from this stuff, and I think we're more wired decathletes for change of things, change of environment. For the output, one thing, going back to the output you mentioned, how we can get kids give more of them. For example, today I use this tool we have this electronic timing system in the indoor facility, laser, and I'll put out hurdles for them. So we'll run hurdles, but with sometimes varying distances, but it's measured, and you see a number in front of you, right there. And the other person sees it too, and it's not about specializing or anything like that. It is about doing it in a fun way, in a playful way, unexpected way, because the distances change, and then seeing the result of it instantly, So in output, sometimes I wonder what kind of tools could be used for med balls. We don't have this. Yeah, like for punching bag, a med ball could be a great tool for that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you mentioned that with the output, because the hurdles, a timing system is basically the same thing. Like if I have a timing system out on the sidewalk, my kids just want to do it. Like they want to see what their score is. And honestly, even with like weightlifting, like I'm sure our thoughts are similar with when kids should start lifting. I mean, I'm not about to have my 7-year-old start lifting, but if the weight's in the garage, like he just wants to try it. He sees me doing it. He wants to. There's something about just seeing if you can do the thing. And I know I've talked with Jeremy Frisch about this. I think but I think what happens a lot with the weights, at least, is then the parent sees that the kid wanted to do the output and test the output, and oh, you're ready to train now. Let's start lifting. And then, well, that's boring. That's 3 sets of 10. I just wanted to see if I could lift the weight. But then there eventually becomes that crossover where just seeing if you can do it does get replaced by route and regime and those elements. But again, I just think that the child always lives in the heart of the athlete somewhere, even within the regime, even within the regimen. Um,
100%.
yeah.
Yes, 100%. I actually picked that up from my last coach, Roman Chevrolet. So I
Mm.
was, I think, 30, 31, turning 31. And he told us twice a week before the weight room, in the off season, we'd play 1-2 touch football against each other. Sometimes
Oh,
in
cool.
teams, you can soccer. You can touch the football once or twice, and you can pass it to the teammate, or you hit it towards the goal. And we always had to go to the gym, ask for the key, because it was a requirement. They did it when he was 36. He was still doing it, and it was
That's
integral
awesome.
part of their training system. And when you think about it, the world record holder played a lot. How why do we dare to say that we shouldn't? Like, it makes sense to me. Okay, it's a little bit individual dependent, etc. Somebody's more routine wired, then you should go be a distance runner. All right,
Mhm.
fine. But overall, most sports, sprinters,
Yeah.
um, jumpers, explosive events, any sport where you have this kind of, yeah, it's just integral no matter how old you are. And I'm now coaching a little bit of fitness in the mornings, and that's key part of my training. That's why people love it. That's why
Yeah.
people want to keep coming back, because I play with them. And then there's my oldest client is 68.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I know here, a lot of what gets people to fitness is just community. Like my friends are there. I know it's hard. I know I don't like it, but my friends are there and that gets me through it. And then I feel good because you get a little bit of lactate going, and lactate's good for the brain. Your heart's pumping. You feel those good
Uh,
responses. But it's rare that I think people think, oh, this could be so much better. Like, what if you started with 10, 15 minutes of play?
yep.
That's how I do.
Mhm.
Um, I train a few adults. It's not my main thing, but when I work play in, it is so well received. And just making like whatever we're gonna do, even if it's thoracic mobility and you're in a plank and one arm's on the ground and the other arm's following a stick or something, or portal stuff with the rod or tennis balls, it is so, and like light roughhousing, it's like the most joyful thing, and it makes this, you're right, it keeps people coming back. They really enjoy it, and
Yeah.
it's maybe along those lines too of like, oh, do your zone 2 cardio, and it's like, well, you're getting all that stuff in there, and the social and emotional piece is just so good.
Exactly. Yeah.
uh I do want to, the theme of this thus far has certainly been kind of like that mix of regime and play, and how play fits in. I do want to get briefly. I won't have quite as much time to ask you this as I had anticipated, but I really am looking forward to your answer because just regionally, I'm interested in the differences between you could just say American track and field coaching, and you could even expand that to strength and conditioning if you like, but let's just say
Mhm.
track and field coaching, and then the school of thought over there. The one thing that I wanted to say as well, I forgot to say this, was with the games and Roman Severly, like former world record
Yep.
holder in the
Yep.
decathlon. As I remember reading some Bondarchuk work, and it looked like they put games in on those. Yeah, very regimented. Bondarchuk, so regimented. Like
Yeah.
everything down to the day of adaptation, and nothing changes in the program, and you do it over and over. But then I think there was days for games, like to play basketball in there too.
Yes.
I was like, ah,
Yes. Yes.
that's cool. So anyways,
Oh man,
that's
a
tell me
huge
a little bit.
topic.
Yeah,
Mm. No, so you're asking the difference between the European versus American strength and conditioning, and maybe track and field, and
yeah.
the first thing that comes to my mind is, I think in America, in some ways, you can afford to focus on the talent and the progressive overload concept. Like, it's all about just progressively more and harder, etc. Here, I think a lot of track coaches, but also just, yeah, I guess track coaches really focusing on the skill,
Hmm.
and sometimes that could be skill of strength and conditioning, but really skill of movement, because the talent is simply less. I think that's it, and like in the Soviet Union, for example, common theme is it was a meat grinder. They could
Yeah.
afford it. Just next, that's it. Here in a small country of Latvia, smaller than the state of Kansas, Latvia, like, well, almost twice as small, 2 times smaller than the state of Kansas. Uh, and we have 100, over 100 federations, so many different sports. So the talent pool is so much smaller, and we simply have to focus on the nuances on the movement of etc. Not saying we're doing it great. I think Americans got it right in so many other ways. For example, you have kept this multi high school sport approach, which is also backed by the research. The Scandinavians have it right up until age of 14, 13, 14. You don't specialize. You're forced to do two sports at least. I don't like the word forced, but I kind of like that. Parents don't clap. They don't encourage winning until then. It's also debatable, but at least
Yeah.
they're not crazy, about,
Yeah.
the winning until they're, 13, 14 teenage years where doesn't matter, man. Like it really doesn't matter. The kids should fall in love with the movement and sport, etc. In the US, sometimes it's like that. We Europeans make a mistake. Americans pick it up because they got it confused, and then they implement the European mistake. We get rid of it in Europe, and Americans implement it, and sometimes it's vice versa. With this long-term athletic development stuff, it was like that too. During the Bondarchuk times, it was good. We actually knew it well. Then we made a mistake of kind of going away from it and specializing early. And Americans are like, oh yeah, this sounds better. We're gonna put more load on, more volume on the quality, the important stuff, the skill work, and suddenly everyone's like 9-year-olds on the table doing a UCL surgery. Baseball kids, a lot of that in the US. And then now Americans start figuring out, okay, now we should focus on long-term athletic development. And we Europeans were like, we forgot that. And I just finished a coaching school, 2-year coaching school, and I had a biomechanics professor who was actually friends with Bondarchuk and a few others, Verkashinsky. He was drinking whiskey in training camps with these guys, and he gave me a book, an old book from 1961, I believe. It was written by the coach of former world record holder in the javelin, Jānis Lūsis. He's a Latvian legend in the track and field. And in that book, Jānis's coach, he wrote about, basically it was a structure. It was game. Every day there's a game in off season for a professional bowling group. Every day there's a game, and he would talk about the games. What kind of games? What is more dangerous? What is more, let's say, what is more enjoyable for them to free their minds? It's unbelievable. I'm reading that book and I'm like, how did we forget all of that? It's insane. And actually, why it connected with me so much is because my first coach, I learned it this year. I guess didn't pay attention to it, but my first coach for maybe 5 years or so was under Jānis Lūsis' coach when he was in university. So, like, this guy basically coached my coach, first coach, and these are the concepts. It goes in waves. We forget, we remember. Americans forget, Europeans remember, and vice versa. I think it's like that in some ways. There's something that I really picked up. I picked up well from. I called him the grandfather of European decathlon. I think he could be a grandfather of Western decathlon. Jiří Čechák. He's a Czech old guy. He passed away a few years ago. I asked him. He spoke English. He actually was a coach, maybe the head coach at the University of Colorado or Colorado State or somewhere. He was there for a few years. He was 82 when I talked to him, and he said, I asked him about training methodologies and exactly your question, American versus European and training methodologies. And he looked at me. It was after a heptathlon. I approached him in the Czech Republic, and he's like, there's no such, he just, blatantly, there's no such thing as a training methodology. That's it. I was like, whoa, okay. Just personal relationships between the coach and the athlete. Of course, with kids, it's different. Like, it's impossible, but ultimately over time, I think Europeans understand that maybe a little bit better. It is more about the relationship between the athlete and the coach than your perfect structure that you created in this progressive overload. I think in Europe, we have more of that intuition kind of implemented in training, and we know it in our hearts a little bit more. Not to say that there are not American coaches who don't do that and don't know it. but maybe overall speaking, it's more common theme here, and I liked it a lot because I went to Prague with American thinking. Like, it's all about the perfect periodized model or
Mm,
somewhat perfect, predictable model, and he just kind of put me on my feet or my bottom. Like,
yeah.
no, there's no such thing as a training methodology whatsoever, and he's well. I forgot to mention he was the first coach of Roman Chevrolet. You
Oh,
know,
really?
yeah, he was
Yeah.
the first coach. Roman doesn't. I think he doesn't really remember much of his like early childhood because he typically said, "Oh, we just played around. We
Mm,
didn't really train." He, his success years he refers to all the coaches afterwards, but the foundation that was the key, the cornerstone, in my opinion, was because of this guy, and it was all about the relationship with the coach, with between the coach and the athlete.
mm. Yeah. It is, it is interesting with those differences. I definitely agree with that. Like it goes in cycles and pendulums. I would love to get that book, 1961. You said it was Giannis Lousis' coach.
Yes.
I would love that. I would love all the javelin games. I want to know them. Of course, javelin, a spear in games, probably from a liability and risk standpoint, may be a struggle for many in the modern age. But I just think, yeah, I think the more that, hey, this guy set the world record and this was what they did, it's when people see that, then it becomes a thing. What happens a lot of times here is, oh, this football team that won whatever championship, they did this. So, oh, let's do that too.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's the main mental heuristic that happens. So to hear that, oh, this, and of course, football is a game itself, but to hear those kind of stories, I think is so valuable. And I know so many older, wise coaches that I know will always point to the old books. And I'm trying to build out my library, and it's almost the ultimate move to say, oh, this book in 1940 said this, or
Yep.
the 20s said this, and but it also just I think we get so caught up that like the optimization mentality, like this is all new, no one's come up with this before, and but I think humans just the human being, the human athlete is a little different operating system than some other technology that's coming out. It's just a little different system that I think we've had a lot of time to work with and a lot of time to put wisdom in. And certainly there is a lot of great stuff coming out now without question. But there's always, yeah, to always go back. It's like to always go back in a cycle and to always see the older when people had this idea. How was this idea leveraged back in the day?
Yeah, yeah. And I think one aspect that I touched on but didn't expand on is the environment that coaches can create through that kind of play because it's contagious. It's extremely contagious. I remember something to probably definitely worth of mentioning is when I started training more systematically in track and field in sixth grade. In off like September, October, the first preparation months. Yes, we did this long runs too, like long distance running, cross country running, but we ran with a purpose. We ran to the
Mm,
forest where there
yes.
was a lake, and we would throw javelin in the aim.
Amazing.
And then whoever gets more points with the aim and do plyometrics, bounding, lots
Heck
of
yeah.
stuff. Like, but whoever gets more points in the aim, sometimes we'd go in the trees, with boys. That person, and that's something we can't do it anymore. But we had a small training group, and that would be driving us back home in my coach's BMW. It's like on the off road, bad road or something, and it's ridiculous. 12-year-old driving the other 5 kids in the back of the car, but that was it. And trying to find these ways in modern times that are, let's say, hopefully more legal, but still just creating that environment of I want to come back. Like I want to come back for more. This is awesome. And I think that's what's a bit missing in some places. Not all places. We are debating it. I think it's coming up more and more. But something to remember that just yeah, create a party in your training.
Hmm. Yeah. Stephen Kotler, the author of many flow state books, has said that the thing that dictates if a child will stick with a sport, like in high school, like they're introduced to it, a freshman in high school, it's how much flow do they experience within that first week of that activity,
Oh, cool.
sport or activity. And it just makes me think about how things are presented. Like I've seen track and field presented in the most boring, rote, like mechanistic to kids. Now, I understand if you're an older athlete, it's a different story. And you're a more individual person. But to kids, I was like, oof, like this is a
Yep.
difficult. This could be difficult.
Yep. 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 That
Yeah.
doesn't
So
work.
yeah. Uh, let's see here. So I wanted to ask you, Reinis, before we ran out of time, and I know again most of this has been more about some of the play-based ideas, but again, it all works in the equation. Outputs, whether if the main thing you're seeking is outputs, play is still in that in a very strong way. But I wanted to ask you, I couldn't leave a conversation with an Eastern European track and field and decathlete athlete without asking about what I've heard about extensive tempo and hopping. So the very mechanical thing, but I've heard that school uses a very, very high volume. Like I've heard like over 30 minutes or 45 minutes of just varied little hops to develop the tendons, the structure. I'm sure if the story got big enough, it'd be 4 hours of hopping or so. I don't know. But and it was who was it? Stefan Holm told me that it was the triple jumper, the Eastern European. I cannot remember his name. He had like a spinny arm action. Markov. Oh, he was Soviet, I think. But that he did like 100 meters of single leg hurdle hop. Like it's like his single leg hurdle hops. The stories just get very wild. So can you maybe set me straight on what the reality is with the volume of those hops and how that European method values that? Or Eastern, I should say.
Well, yeah. I don't think I can set you straight because it probably varies between. Because I think Latvian methods are a huge mix of the Soviet style and also the German methods. So it's a big mix.
Yeah.
In Czech Republic, they kind of had their own, but of course, lots of stuff came from the Soviet bloc. So I can share a little bit of the differences too between what I experienced with Cliff at Kansas State. And what I saw in Latvia before when I was developing and what I had professionally when I trained with the professional group, because we also had in our group in Prague, we had an 831 long jumper, which is elite, a really high level long jumper, Radek Juška. And we did all sorts of plyometrics in the off seasons. And uh, I think keywords here, in order to have a lot of volume of extensive plyos, means medium to light to medium intensity plyometrics. The bottom line in Europe, I think how we believe about it is soften the surface a little bit. Doesn't have to be sand, of course, because that's muscular and metabolic so much. But don't go on the hard surface all year long. Tendon stiffness, good, fine. All of that is at some point necessary. Roman Sherbele really focused on that. With him, it was all about bounds. If in Latvia we did a lot of hurdle hops with the Roman Sherbele and the Czech method, but really him. And I signed up for his group because of that. I wanted to experience the very simple old school. Because he was not a coach before he started coaching us. He was a TV star. He was an athlete.
That's awesome.
Who went to become an anchor at a TV station for 10 years. And suddenly he's like, I'm going to be a coach. Who is with me? All of the Czech best decathletes said no because they knew they would be dying, and he said, guys, some days you'll be crawling home. It's going to be hard. And partly because of a lot of plyometrics. It was twice a week, bounding, 60-meter bounds, like just loads of it, especially in the off season. In season, it was the perfect tailoring,
Sure.
the tapering. It was not very, very much high intensity, but not very much. And the bounding, I'm going to go a bit back and forth between the countries, etc. I think it will be more rich that way with the time that we have. With the bounding, the first time I heard about that was from Dietmar. Let me not dodge his name. He's the former world record holder in the high jump, Dietmar Mogenburg.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. I've heard of him. Yeah.
So I actually met him twice. He was at the training camp in Antalya, Turkey, 1 year, and I have eyes. I and my friend from Montenegro, Darko Pešić, he went to the Olympics this past year. We have eyes that look interested, and he always these Olympians often look for these kind of eyes. So he approached us and he showed us some old clips and stuff, and he explained the benefit of, he explained, I guess the benefit of bounds compared to vertical jumping. And he said most of the high jumpers are doing most of the bounding rather than vertical jumping for that. And he didn't really go into the details why, but he's 239 high jumper.
Sure.
He held both world records, indoor and outdoor, won Olympic Games. And then I saw that implemented in Roma's program, a lot of bounding, all sorts. And like for small extensive plyos, I think that was more in the developing years or very early season to prepare the ankles for. My coach Josef Karas, he was an artist with that. Also former Cliffs athlete, by the way. And when I went to Prague before Roman Chevrolet, I had a brilliant guy, Josef Karas. He was a former decathlete as well, and in off season we would do a lot of these kind of small plyometrics for a month to prepare the ankles and the shins, all of it, for something higher intensity. I remember one thing from Cliff. It was funny. Cliff's methods were also actually partly European, Eastern European. Actually, a lot of overlaps there, especially with plyometrics. But Cliff at some point coached Kenny Harrison, also former world record holder, I believe, in the triple jump. And so he was with him for extended period of time. And I was complaining about shin splints. My shins are hurting. And I always had shin splints since I remember myself, even basketball. And he's like, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "I need an MRI. I'm going to go see what's going on." And I mentioned my friend Darko had the same issue. He was sending me his MRI results. And I was like, oh, presenting to Cliff. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, when Kenny did his first MRI in early 2000s, when they first appeared, they showed him scarred and healed 17 stress fractures in his shin bone."
Ooh.
And he just complained that his shins are hurting all these years.
Oh,
it never broke, but like he ended up being the world record holder.
Amazing.
Now, I'm not saying that pain is always necessarily good, but I think in Eastern Europe we also think that like if there is pain associated with jumping, it's all right. Not when you're a kid, not when you're a really young kid, but it's gonna be that way. Like that adaptation for the shin bone. We value the jump so much that we even close our eyes with a little bit of for the pain. And for Roman Chevrolet, it was simple. "Oh, your shins hurt. Here's the pill." You know,
Here's ibuprofen or something.
a lot of it was stronger than that. But that was common practice for them, and they would just do it for the comfort. And they were so necessary, these plyometrics, that a painkiller will allow us to keep doing them, and that's it, you know. And if you watched, there's a Swedish maybe documentary, The Price of Gold, where Caroline Klüft, also Olympic champion in the heptathlon, you know, she's in the movie. There are a few other Swedish, you know, greats, and doing plyometrics, and everyone's broken completely, you know. But through that kind of system where you see not just high performances, but unheard of performances, you need plyometrics. And of course, you try to figure out ways to, you know, as best as you can, recover between the sessions. You place the sessions far apart. Don't do it one day in between, especially the higher intensity. But you asked specifically about extensive plyos. I think my experience mostly has been we use that for preparation before preparation. So it's like to build the ankle so nothing gets too much stressed all of a sudden. I said a lot already. Sorry for going off the tangent, but
yeah, that's okay. You know, that's interesting. You mentioned it with the plyos and that, and I think about speaking of like Stefan Holm, and he had said his Achilles always hurt, but yet his Achilles were like I think way thicker and stronger than the average human being, and it makes me think about like Kenny Harrison, who well, also with the placebo and nocebo effect, if someone would have told him he had all those stress fractures early in his career, I wonder if he would have been like, "Oh, I should probably stop this." And most common sense would say, "Stop this." But I wonder if you actually like the total strength of the bone over time, I wonder if it ended up being quite a bit stronger.
Oh, no. Like that was the point of Cliff. He said it had built so many layers of stronger bone on top of it because he kind of withstood that pain. I'm not suggesting and saying, oh, all
Yes,
these kids should be
same,
doing, and even,
same.
even,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, even this professor, Yanis Lanka, who was also a teammate of Yanis Lusis, the world record javelin thrower, he would also say that Russian Soviets made a lot of mistakes, essentially, when Verkoshinsky was producing all these jumps and plyometrics. Oh, a lot of broken legs were found. A lot of broken legs were found in the process. So gotta be careful, gotta be gradual. Still, that is important.
yeah. It makes me think, Reinis, about. So I have a book on my shelf about the mighty Atom. So who is the world's strongest man in terms of like body weight feet? He like bend horseshoes and stuff,
Okay.
and at 140 pounds or 70 kilos body weight, and just like all these metal bending feats, he could like even bite through nails, and all these dentists confirmed it, like that he was biting.
Oh,
He had conditioned his teeth to be that hard over time. So all these like tissues of his body to be able to do these things. And he had a protege who's went by Slim the Hammerman. And the fact in this book, it must be a sign, because in this book that I got, this used book, it was the signature of the Adam's son, and then Slim the Hammerman signed the back or something like that. I was like, this is like amazing. And anyway, Slim the Hammerman, his big thing was he'd take these sledgehammers and he would hold them at arm's length straight in front of them, and then tilt them back with his wrist, so the hammer, or if it was an axe blade, it would just tick his forehead and then come back up. And so the actual pressure in his wrists was very, very high, and to the point where he, in that process, had 22 stress fractures in his wrists in that road to doing these feats. And it kind of makes me think about that with, it's a tough street, right? Because if you just tell all the young athletes, oh, well, Kenny Harrison and Slim, you don't want people going and getting hurt. But then
yes.
what I think about, and I can't recommend that as a good, podcast host or coach, but it makes me think about, well, what was it about Kenny, or Slim or Stefan that gave them that power, that systemic power, mind, body, as a total system to overcome those things, to just
Yes.
continue that adaptation, to be able to continue that. Because I guess, if you say, well, what makes us superhuman? I think there's something that is systemic with that. And
Yes. Yes.
I was thinking about, the stress fracture. Now you got me thinking, because my best year of track, I mean, I was not elite by any means, but high jump 7 feet, which for me was good, 2 meters 14. But I was heavy. I mean, I was meter 85 tall, and about, my kilos is off. I mean, it was about 180 pounds. So I was like 80
Oh,
kilos.
not too bad. It's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. Still heavier than most. And, I was triple jumping pretty well. And I did a lot of, a fair amount of bounding, and then single leg hurdle hops was my big one. And, I think it is interesting with like that bounding and hurdle hop continuum. I think they're both part of it, but I would say in favor of bounding and different rhythms of bounding with hurdle hops in there. I think if it's mostly hurdle hops and a little bounding, that's not good for high jump, or not as good. Anyways, my left shin, my takeoff leg, towards the end of that year was really in the bone. I could feel it. Like, I'm like, ooh, this really, I had to take a week off completely. And then I didn't know if I was going to be able to compete at this big meet. And a buddy of mine, a pole vaulter, he was really good. He's like, oh, just take these ibuprofens, painkillers. And I was like so hesitant. I was like, I don't want to, like, because in my mind, I'm like, it's masking the pain. If something's wrong, I don't want to do it. And I remember taking them. I had a really good meet. Like, I'm like, I don't hurt at all. This feels great. But I just remember thinking, like, if I keep doing this, I don't think that's going to be a good thing. I feel like my shin's going to snap in half. But it's just interesting, like, the mind for those people who did overcome it, where they're like,
No, I think it's also,
yeah,
I think it's also fair if we're honest with each other, strength coaches and also track and field coach and other sports coaches, that we don't sell the professional sport, the elite sport, as something that's cozy and comfy and blah blah blah. Oh, it's gonna be a lot of sacrifice. For example, I just spoke with the coach of. We have a girl who threw 66 meters in the jab, Latvian record holder, and she won the Diamond League, won the final once several years ago, and also a really elite level javelin thrower girl. And he said the last years of her career, she had retired already, but the last years of her career, she didn't compete without a shot in her shoulder, cortisone shot in her shoulder. Impossible. So probably the last 3 years of her main comps, never, like, just to be honest, if you're gonna sacrifice and put it all out there, that's the future.
Mm.
Just to be fair. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. I got into your podcast. When did you start? What year was it?
2016. Yeah.
2016. So it would have been the year when I started rehabbing or hoping for to return in the decathlon, and I was looking up any tendon research out there. And I can't remember, was it 2016 or later, but Keith Barr was
Yeah.
the first podcast. The episode with him was the first episode I listened to, and I started digging about the tendon stuff, and then also about climbers that have these thick fingers, talking about adaptation and even bone strength, but tendon strength, just fat fingers. It's like really like frogs, they could, um, and it is that, like elite athleticism and elite athletics is that. Like you just need to put in hours and reps and sets over the years. And partly when I wrote the book in 2019, just through my own personal lens and story, the main theme was cumulative training effects. Like if you have somewhat talent, cumulative training effect, if you stay in the game, if you don't have many disruptions and interruptions of training, you should get somewhere. Like it's a formula.
Yeah.
You're gonna get somewhere. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, slow, consistent building over time. I mean, that's the preferred way to do. If you want those tendon and bone adaptations, ideally, it's slow, consistent, appropriate loads. Um, yeah, I am so interested with those individuals who are kind of on that extreme of the bell curve. Like, what was it about them? That.
yep.
So yeah, just to finish on the concept of tissues and tendons, dual Achilles ruptures. Keith Barr, you mentioned. Anything for you that you found that you learned in coming back from those ruptures, and that also you look at in terms of just general tendon and Achilles health?
Yeah. Well, I kind of took Keith's, at that point, I was still Mr. Routine. I took his word for what, oh, that's the ultimate truth, the only way. And I think that he has a lot of really good, solid evidence, and also Ebony Rio research on this stuff. Like a lot of isometrics, but both ways, just actually, I'd say slow and controlled work with weights. Um, Consistent weight work and not taking rest. I still took ice, like I don't want to say ice baths, but I did it so I was able to continue training, because ice does take away the pain.
Yeah.
And not just Achilles ruptures. Later, I developed terrible tendinopathy, patellar tendinopathy. I had to have 12, I want to say 12 shockwave therapies for it. I got rid of most of the calcification, but it was close to rupturing as well. Uh, so a bit of genetics probably. um, but isometric, slow controlled, both ways. I think most of the concepts probably came through Keith Barr and self experimentation in that way. And I think it was never doing sudden things, or doing less sudden things, sudden increase in load, because often my Achilles start hurting again. The other one, not the one I was when I was, for example, introducing sprinting too fast. The best thing ever, sprint, awesome, need to do it, but gotta be very gradual at that. Gotta be gradual at speeds. And I was the healthiest, more or less, uh, for the dynamic moves and knees and Achilles under Roman Shebrele. Actually, the last years I was the oldest but the healthiest,
Interesting.
because they never took out sprints. All year long, you're doing accelerations. In off season, 4 times a week, sometimes twice a day. 4 maybe, not much, just a little bit. Maybe 4 in the warm up, but always doing fast work. And wherever I had in like extended periods of time without that speed, I always had shock to the system, and my Achilles would hurt. Um, yeah, so I think it is still about very gradual and all the time this dynamic stuff. Like don't take out the past stuff. Don't be um, half intensity work or medium intensity work for most of the time, and then in season only then high intensity work. So a mixture of microdosing isometrics, slow slow eccentrics, and just being consistent with the dynamic stuff.
Yeah, slow and often over time, but tendons especially. I kind of feel like the tendons and then the muscle tissue as well, but that's if you look at like the play based and all the learning end, and then the more mathematical based end of it, I feel like those tendons follow the laws of math very,
Yep.
very much more so than other elements in that training equation, a linear math. And I will say too, like yeah, for me, one of my biggest things is just if I can get on like these little red discs I talk about all the time. If I just get on those twice a day, little and often, it goes so far versus if I just go once a week or something like that. And then, yeah, like you said too, it's that huge jump in load that's always the kicker with that stuff, especially Achilles for me. If it's consistent, consistency and even if it's velocity, it's always great. It's just that one, like if I just have fun with like a little, even if it's a low box step jump, like an 8 to 12 inch box, but I'm doing a bunch of them and I'm having fun. Sometimes the next day, man, like it was like 50% more volume. Ooh, that's just. But if it was only 10% more, it's totally fine. So it's so funny how that works.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think when we do the next podcast episode in a few years, maybe less, I'll probably be with both Achilles ruptured by then. I have a feeling that I do have bad genetics for it because I'm always like really just Achilles is my Achilles heel, and like it's if it's not the one, it's the other, and it's always been like that. And actually, two doctors had told me that. Well, one was who did the surgery, both surgeries in America, and one doctor before I went to the US said, "Oh, you're never going to be a professional athlete." I was 19. I just
oh,
scored. I
jeez.
was fifth in Europe, and she's like, "Oh, you just have genetically thin tendons and ligaments.
Oh
You'll
my
be
gosh,
screwed. You're never going to make it." It's like ridiculous. And
that's crazy.
so when we talk next time, I don't know, but my hope, Keith really gave me his concepts of developing the middle of the donuts rather than the or opposite, leaving the middle and developing around gave me a lot of hope when I was rehabbing in both the knee and the Achilles, and I think I have to thank him partly because that I got my career back and I improved my personal best in the decathlon and had a fun extra 5 years of career.
Yeah, I love the donut thing. And yeah, I found a combo of like the disc stuff. I feel like is really good getting the totality of the outer donut.
Can you,
And
can you go explain that a little bit, the disc thing?
oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so I have these red balanced discs, but they're very hard point. So where versus like standing on a foam pad that's very soft
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
These are very hard points. So it's a wooden circle, but it's got like a doorknob underneath. So
I
it's
got it.
kind of
I
like
got it.
it's a little more balanced demand. But it also is a fast feedback loop. It's not like a slow soft one. It's real fast. So it really is it's very rich and fast activation. And so just doing like circular motions with that is really, really good. The problem is there's not really a reliable, affordable source. For people ask me about them, and I think, well, you could just make your own, just get a doorknob and a disc.
Yeah.
Sports Science Lab sells a version as well. So yeah, that I feel like that gets like the fullness of the outer of the donut, and then the inner is more like that longer sustained hard ISO. And I
Yeah.
get that through this old calf machine called the Sky King. And
All
it's
right.
just you sit there and it's crazy. It's like 25 years old. So I find it's like if I want to get the center donut, I do that. And if I'm consistent with that and maintain my loads, on money. Like and it's funny you mentioned the tendon thing. It's just funny with like nocebos and doctors because I have something in my genes. My report, one of those reports came back and said you have a weak tendon disposition. And if someone would have told me that when I was 17, I probably wouldn't have jumped as high as I did. I
Mhm.
bet you.
Yeah.
I would have been thinking about it. And now that I'm in my mid to late 30s, yeah, I could see it creeping up. But I also know that if I manage it, it's fine. At least I always
Yeah. No.
have
Overall, for
that.
me too.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
mental.
Like.
There's the mental part of it, like, and so yeah. I guess that's the debate of those genetic tests, right? Like, do you tell people like what's
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I think a lot can be done, and people definitely shouldn't give up and um, not listen to all of those. I think my pattern psychologically has been to
sure.
always try to prove you wrong. So it it maybe affected me in the wrong way. I pushed too hard at times where I should have rested, and that was maybe not sleeping enough and pushing too hard was maybe a culprit of me not becoming an Olympian. And that's something I also really emphasize when I go talk to kids. Sleep,
Yep.
sleep enough,
Mm.
and rest enough after good training. Don't just rest,
Yeah.
After good training, go sleep enough and rest and chill. And chill quality. Like just not do your thing.
Yeah.
Intensity.
The art of chill is its own podcast as well. But
Yeah.
I think we're out of time for today. Reinis, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed your perspective as well as, being able to talk decathlon, play, so many fun things. And so thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, Joel, thanks a lot. It's been, well, yeah, let's say a small dream of mine, just like my ridiculous story. It's been a small dream of mine to come talk to you. So thanks for the opportunity.